Here's the thing about Penang. Everyone agrees it's extraordinary. The food, the heritage, the Chinese shophouses, the Indian temples, the mosques, the clan jetties, the street art, the char kway teow that made Anthony Bourdain lose his mind on camera. Travel magazines call it one of Asia's great cities. The UNESCO inscription came in 2008. The Michelin Guide arrived in 2023. The tourists followed year after year in numbers that keep breaking records. On paper, Penang is thriving. So why, when you actually talk to the people who built this city over 2 centuries, the families who lived and traded and cooked and prayed in the same shophouses for 4 generations, does it feel like they're being erased? Why is the city with the most celebrated food culture in Southeast Asia watching its hawkers disappear? Why is the most congested city in Malaysia responding to its gridlock by reclaiming a new island and adding another 100,000 people to an island that already floods? And why does the UNESCO Heritage Core, the crown jewel, the reason anyone bothers to come, now hold approximately 9,000 residents where there used to be 50,000? Not a slight population shift, not gradual change. A population collapse of 80% inside 16 years, in a city that was specifically inscribed as a UNESCO World Heritage Site because of its living multicultural community. That is what nobody in the brochures is telling you, and that is what we need to talk about. Let's start with the number that should make everyone stop and pay attention. Before the UNESCO inscription in 2008, the Heritage Core of Georgetown had an estimated 50,000 residents. By November 2024, according to Penang Heritage Trust President Clement Liang, that number had fallen to approximately 9,000. Liang didn't say this quietly or anonymously. He said it in an interview with Malay Mail. He said the cultural festivals that used to animate the city are disappearing. He said the Hungry Ghost Festival, which once saw temporary altars and stages set up on nearly every corner, now has so few that the committees which used to operate independently have started merging just to have enough people. He said that during Chinese New Year, scenes of residents praying outside their homes with giant joss sticks, the kind of scene that Georgetown's UNESCO listing was specifically designed to protect, have become increasingly rare. Now here's the brutal irony. The UNESCO inscription was supposed to protect all of this. UNESCO certified Georgetown precisely because of what Liang is describing: the living multicultural community, the intangible cultural heritage, the festivals, the trades, the generations of families in the same buildings. UNESCO's own criteria referenced the unique architectural and cultural townscape. The inscription drove the property values. The property values drove the rents. The rents drove out the residents. The residents took the culture with them, and now the heritage site that UNESCO inscribed for its living community has lost 80% of that community. What replaced them? Boutique hotels, cafes, trinket shops, food tour operators selling the experience of a community that no longer lives there. The heritage became the product. The product consumed the heritage. And the worst part, the genuinely infuriating part, is that this wasn't some unpredictable accident. Academic researchers documented it happening in real time. The gentrification of Georgetown post-UNESCO inscription has been studied, written about, and published across multiple journals. The mechanisms were visible. The repeal of the Control of Rent Act in 2000 had already sent rents from 30 ringgit to 600 ringgit per month overnight. The UNESCO listing accelerated everything. And the response has been, at best, a pilot program on Armenian Street where a handful of families were allowed to stay at frozen rents. One pilot? In a heritage zone that had 50,000 residents and now has 9,000. The math on that doesn't work. And the food, Penang's most famous export, the reason food writers from around the world make pilgrimages here, is caught in the same undertow. Kim Hok-soo, a Michelin-starred chef who grew up in Penang, put it plainly: the pushcarts are slowly disappearing. Margins too thin, labor too intensive, young people unwilling to take on the grind. On TripAdvisor and travel forums, returning visitors note that older places have closed as owners retire, with family not wanting to carry on, and that they've been replaced by Middle Eastern and Italian restaurants. This is what the end of a food culture looks like from street level. Not a dramatic collapse. A quiet disappearance, stall by stall, family by family. The city that built its entire global identity on food authenticity is losing its food authentic one retirement at a time, with nothing structured in place to catch what falls. Now let's talk about getting around. Or rather, let's talk about not getting around, because in 2024, the TomTom Traffic Index, which tracks 500 cities worldwide, named Georgetown the most congested city in Malaysia. Not third, not second, first. An average of 27 minutes to travel 10 kilometers. That's worse than Kuala Lumpur, which came fifth. Globally, Georgetown ranked 73rd for traffic congestion, which means it is playing in the same league as cities 10 times its size. And here's the thing you have to understand about Penang's geography to appreciate why this is so devastating. Penang Island is an island. There is currently one main spine road, the Lebuhraya Tun Doctor Lim Chong Yu, serving the entire island. Road projects begun in 2016 to create a second spine were still incomplete in late 2024, with sections stuck in legal disputes, design phases, and developer timelines. Jalan Paya Terubong remains the sole artery for entire communities traversing between Eritam and Bukit Jambul, and during peak hours it is, according to the Star, a horrendous bottleneck. The island has 2.4 million vehicles entering it regularly. The island's public transport modal share, the percentage of trips taken by bus or rail rather than private car, is an estimated 10%. For comparison, Singapore is around 67%. So what is Penang doing about this? The government announced the Mutiara Line LRT, a 10 billion ringgit project. It's expected to begin construction in the third quarter of 2025. Completion is projected within 6 to 7 years from that date, meaning the earliest realistic relief from a transit system that was discussed, debated, and planned for well over a decade arrives sometime around 2032. Meanwhile, a former chief transport engineer named Lim Thien Heng went on record in January 2025 to say, "I think there is enough lip service. We have been debating and hearing about all kinds of proposals and projects in the past. Nothing has moved. Enough of just talking." That's not a political opponent speaking, that's the former chief transport engineer. And someone else asked the question publicly in May 2025, is Penang spending billions to make traffic worse? The answer, buried in a Free Malaysia Today opinion piece, is essentially yes, because the solution being proposed to the congestion crisis is adding more people to an island that already cannot move. Here's where it gets interesting. To fund the LRT, because the federal government during the Najib era refused to fund transport infrastructure for an opposition-governed state, Penang's government came up with a plan: land reclamation. If you create new land by reclaiming it from the sea, you can sell development rights on that land and use the proceeds to pay for the transport system. This is how Silicon Island was born, a 930-hectare artificial island off the southern coast of Penang. The project is being built by Gamuda. Reclamation began in September 2023. As of December 2024, 28 hectares had been created. The target is 121 hectares per year from 2025 onwards. Total reclamation is projected to take 10 to 15 years. When complete, Silicon Island will add tens of thousands of residents to Penang. It will host the depot for the LRT it is financing. It is marketed as a smart, green, sustainable city, sponge city infrastructure, 70 to 30 public-private transport modal share, mangrove planting, eco-shorelines, recycled water. The branding is genuinely impressive. But let's hold two things in our head at the same time. First, Penang has flooded repeatedly and severely. The 2017 floods displaced more than 7,000 people, affected 159 areas, killed 7 people, and caused more than 250 million ringgit in economic losses. From 2020 to 2023, flash floods have repeatedly disrupted daily life across the island. The existing island has a congestion crisis caused in part by decades of coastal and hillside development that removed natural drainage. Environmental and civil society groups including Penang Forum, the Consumer Association of Penang, and Sahabat Alam Malaysia formally warned that the reclamation project could eliminate coastal buffers, mangroves and mudflats that currently protect the shoreline and thereby worsen the flooding problem. They estimated the southern coast where Silicon Island is being built is Penang's richest and most biodiverse fishing area, and that the project risks endangering more than 6,000 fishers' livelihoods while depleting nearly 51,000 tons of marine catch, worth hundreds of millions of ringgit annually. Second, the state is reclaiming a new island with tens of thousands of new residents to fund a transport system to serve an existing island that already cannot move its current residents. While the existing island's heritage core has lost 80% of its community, its hawker food culture is aging out, and flash floods remain a recurring infrastructure failure. The solution to Penang's problems is more Penang. And more Penang is, on current evidence, what creates the next problem. Let me be clear about what can still be saved here, because this city is worth fighting for. The food that remains, the char kway teow, the asam laksa, the curry mee from the stall that has been trading since before independence, the Hokkien mee with its deep prawn broth built over hours, is still exceptional. Walking through parts of the heritage core at 6 in the morning, when the hawker stalls are firing up and the kopitiam crowd is already in their seats and the smells of coffee and char and belacan are layering over each other, is still one of the great urban experiences in the world. The architecture is genuinely irreplaceable. Nowhere else in Southeast Asia has this density of colonial and Chinese shophouse fabric in this condition. The problem is not that Penang is unfixable. The problem is that the fixes being applied are either too small, too late, or structurally contradictory. 3 things need to happen. First, the heritage displacement crisis needs a real response proportionate to the scale of the problem, not one pilot project on one street. The city had 50,000 heritage core residents and now has 9,000. A response at that scale requires rent control mechanisms, heritage tenancy protections with legal teeth, and funded succession pathways for hawkers who are aging out. Similar in ambition, if not identical in structure, to what Singapore built for its hawker centres. Penang spent years furious that Singapore won the UNESCO Intangible Heritage designation for hawker culture, pointing out that the food originated in Malaysia. The answer to that frustration is not anger. It's building the infrastructure to protect what you have before it's gone. Second, traffic relief cannot wait a decade for a mega project. The LRT is necessary. It is also 6 to 7 years away. In the meantime, immediate interventions, congestion pricing, strict vehicle entry limits, demand management for the island have to be on the table. The former chief transport engineer already said the lip service era is over. Take that seriously. And third, Silicon Island needs to be evaluated with brutal honesty about the compound risk it represents. Adding 121 hectares of reclaimed land per year to the waters of a flood-vulnerable island with existing drainage failures and a vanishing coastal buffer is not a risk-free proposition, regardless of how good the Sponge City branding is. The environmental warnings from Penang Forum and allied groups deserve a formal, transparent, independent assessment, not dismissal. If you've lived in Penang, if you've watched what has changed since 2008, if you've returned and found the stall closed and the family gone, if you grew up here and feel the city shifting under your feet, I want to hear from you in the comments. And if you're watching from outside and thinking about whether Penang is still worth the trip, the answer is yes. But go now. The thing that makes it extraordinary is getting harder to find.